Not gonna lie, this I did not see coming. And it's amazing when you have someone who not only shares a lot of interest.
Jonathan Scott, one half of HGTV's beloved Property Brothers duo, has never been far from the spotlight. But in recent years, his personal life has drawn just as much attention as his design transformations. The latest wave of headlines has little to do with dream homes and everything to do with matters of the heart. His relationship with actress Zooey Deschanel has become a favorite subject for fans, entertainment outlets, and social media alike, turning the couple into one of the most talked-about pairings in both television and Hollywood. Join us to talk about why their relationship has made headlines. Scandal or love? Jonathan Scott before the spotlight romance. Long before Jonathan Scott became half of one of television's most recognizable couples, he was carving out his own path in both life and career. Born in Vancouver, Canada in 1978, Jonathan and his identical twin brother Drew grew up with a shared interest in performance, magic, and eventually real estate. Their dynamic personalities and natural chemistry set them apart. But behind the light-hearted humor fans would later see on HGTV, Jonathan's personal life was more private and, at times, complicated. When Property Brothers launched in 2011, the show turned Jonathan and Drew into household names. Audiences were drawn not just to the renovations, but to the brothers' charisma and easy banter. Jonathan quickly became known as the construction half of the duo, wielding hammers and saws while Drew handled the real estate side. The formula worked brilliantly, and soon the twins were building an HGTV empire that would expand into spin-offs, merchandise, and even best-selling books. But while Drew's personal milestones, such as marriage and starting a family, were occasionally spotlighted, Jonathan's romantic life remained much more understated. Before his headline-making relationship with Zooey Deschanel, Jonathan had experienced both love and heartbreak. He was married once before, to a Canadian airline crew scheduler named Kelsey Yulee. The two tied the knot in 2007 during the early days of Jonathan's real estate ventures. But as his career began to take off and the demands of show business increased, the relationship came under strain. By 2010, the marriage had ended in divorce, a chapter Jonathan later admitted was painful and transformative. He opened up in interviews about how the experience shaped his views on commitment, trust, and the realities of balancing a demanding career with personal happiness. After the divorce, Jonathan largely kept his dating life away from the cameras, though tabloids occasionally speculated about new relationships. He was linked to Canadian radio producer Jacinta Kuznetsov for several years, and their partnership appeared steady and serious. Fans followed along as the two shared glimpses of their life together, including travel photos and philanthropic work. However, that relationship also came to an end in 2018, just a year before Jonathan would meet the woman who would completely change the narrative of his personal life. What's striking about Jonathan's journey before Zooey is how it reflects a broader theme of reinvention. Professionally, he reinvented himself from magician to real estate entrepreneur to television personality. Personally, he had to rebuild after heartbreak, learning how to navigate fame and private vulnerability at the same time. Fans often admired him not just for his craftsmanship on home renovations, but for the way he spoke openly about failure, resilience, and the hope of finding lasting love again. By the time 2019 rolled around, Jonathan Scott was an established TV personality, with a global fan base, a flourishing business empire, and the scars of past relationships. Few could have predicted that his next chapter would arrive in such a serendipitous and very Hollywood way, marking the beginning of a romance that would push him into the entertainment headlines like never before. How Jonathan and Zooey met. Back in 2019, Jonathan Scott's life took a turn no one really saw coming. By then, he was already a household name through Property Brothers, the guy with the easy smile and a knack for turning fixer-uppers into dream homes. Zooey Deschanel, on the other hand, was known for something completely different: her acting, her music, and of course her unforgettable run as Jess on New Girl. Two separate worlds, two separate careers, and yet one chance encounter brought them together. That moment happened on Carpool Karaoke, the series. The setup was simple. Jonathan and Drew Scott would be paired up with Zooey and her sister, Emily Deschanel, for a sing-along episode. just another day of lighthearted TV fun. But sometimes it's the simplest setups that change everything. Neither Jonathan nor Zoe went into that day expecting to meet someone who would completely shift the direction of their lives. Zoe had recently separated from her husband, Jacob Pechenik, with whom she shares 2 children. Jonathan was about a year removed from his breakup with Jacinta Kuznetsov, still focused on work but open to whatever the future might hold. They weren't looking for anything. But chemistry has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. People who were there noticed it right away. The laughs, the ease, the way they bounced off each other. Jonathan, who'd always been portrayed as approachable and grounded, found himself drawn to Zoe's quick wit and individuality. And Zoe, who'd spent years playing Hollywood's quirky sweetheart, seemed to appreciate Jonathan's authenticity. In a setting as casual as singing in a car, a spark quietly took root. Not long after, the world caught on. Paparazzi shots surfaced of Jonathan and Zoe holding hands, smiling, looking every bit like 2 people enjoying each other's company. Headlines spread fast. Entertainment outlets called them an unexpected couple. Fans on social media chimed in too, with reactions ranging from total surprise to wholehearted support. Wait, Zooey Deschanel and Jonathan Scott? Didn't see that coming. What set their early connection apart was how genuine it felt. They didn't rush into staged red carpet debuts or glossy magazine reveals. Instead, they let people catch little glimpses. A photo together here, a public outing there. The message was simple. This wasn't about creating buzz. It was about something real. Jonathan would later admit that their bond felt easy right from the start, like they were already moving in the same direction. For fans, that authenticity was magnetic. Here was a pairing that looked fun, natural, and refreshingly human in a world where celebrity couples often seem manufactured. They leaned into playful moments, like dressing up for Halloween or posting goofy selfies, without overthinking how it would play in the press. It gave the impression that their connection wasn't a storyline, it was simply their life. Their story didn't start with a Hollywood premiere or a carefully crafted reveal. It started in a car, singing songs and laughing with family. And that's part of what made it so captivating, an unexpected romance that felt as spontaneous as it was sincere. The early days in their relationship. Once the first photos of Jonathan Scott and Zooey Deschanel surfaced, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know more about this new pairing. And to be fair, it was hard not to be curious. Jonathan, the HGTV home renovation star, and Zoe, the indie darling turned sitcom icon, it wasn't exactly the match people had predicted. But that was also part of the magic. In those early months, the two walked a careful line between privacy and openness. They weren't hiding, far from it, but they also weren't turning their relationship into a publicity campaign. Instead, they let people in just enough. A cozy photo together here, a red carpet appearance there, social media posts that felt fun, not forced. And each time fans responded with more enthusiasm. One of the big turning points came when Jonathan appeared on Zoe's Instagram feed for the first time. It wasn't staged or polished, just a natural moment, the kind of post you'd expect from anyone sharing a glimpse of their life. For fans, though, it was confirmation. This wasn't just a fling or a paparazzi rumor. They were a real couple, and they weren't afraid to share it. The public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the idea of Jonathan and Zoe together. In part, it was the novelty. The idea of an HGTV host dating a Hollywood actress had that odd couple appeal. But beyond that, the two just looked genuinely happy. That happiness came through in photos, in interviews, and in the way they talked about each other without hesitation. Of course, not everyone was sold right away. Some fans of New Girl had a hard time picturing Zoe with anyone who wasn't her fictional counterpart Nick Miller. Others, more familiar with Property Brothers, weren't used to seeing Jonathan's personal life so front and center. But even the skeptics eventually had to admit these two seemed like a great match. Their first few public outings together only added to the buzz. Whether it was attending family events, Halloween parties in matching costumes, or red carpets where they looked effortlessly in sync, Jonathan and Zoe showed a side of themselves that was playful and authentic. They weren't trying to be Hollywood's it couple. They were just two people enjoying life together, and that authenticity made the coverage even bigger. By late 2019, and into 2020, their relationship became a regular headline. Entertainment magazines ran features, talk shows mentioned them, Fans on Twitter and Instagram kept the conversation alive, but what stood out was how grounded they both seemed, even as the attention grew. Jonathan was still the same easygoing renovator fans had known for years, and Zoe was still the quirky, relatable actress people loved. Being together didn't change who they were. If anything, it seemed to highlight their best qualities. Another key part of those early days was how well Jonathan blended into Zoe's world, and vice versa. Zoe introduced him to her children, which is no small step for any parent. Jonathan, who had always been open about wanting a family, stepped into that role with patience and care. Fans noticed the effort, and many admired the way he handled it. At the same time, Zoe supported Jonathan's projects, even appearing alongside him at events connected to Property Brothers. Their relationship wasn't just about romance, it was about two lives intertwining in a way that felt balanced and genuine. Looking back, it's easy to see why the early stage of their relationship captured so much attention. It wasn't flashy, but it was compelling. Two well-known figures from very different industries came together in a way that seemed almost improbable, and yet it worked. Their comfort with each other, their willingness to share without oversharing, and the happiness that radiated from every photo, it all set the tone for what was to come. By the time the world was adjusting to the pandemic in early 2020, Jonathan and Zoe had gone from a surprising new couple to a solid partnership that fans genuinely rooted for. One of the biggest questions whenever a celebrity couple goes public is simple: how do their personal lives fit together? Merging their lives. For Jonathan Scott and Zooey Deschanel, this was more than just a curiosity. It was a real-life balancing act. Because unlike many Hollywood romances that stay in their own bubble, their relationship involved kids, families, and two very different professional worlds. Zoe came into the relationship as a mom of two. She shares daughter Elsie and son Charlie with her ex-husband, Jacob Pachenik. For anyone dating a parent, there's always that step of navigating not just the relationship itself, but also how it fits into family life. And Jonathan, to his credit, didn't shy away from it. He's been open for years about wanting a family of his own, so stepping into Zoe's world wasn't something he resisted. Instead, he embraced it. In those early months, he took things slowly, letting the kids set the pace. By all accounts, he made the transition with patience and care. Fans noticed, too. Whenever Zoe shared a glimpse of family outings, a theme park trip here, a holiday photo there, Jonathan was right there, smiling and clearly invested. It wasn't performative, it was natural, and people admired that. Jonathan even spoke publicly about how much he enjoyed that part of his life. In interviews, he mentioned how spending time with Zoe's kids gave him a sense of joy and fulfillment he hadn't expected. For viewers who'd watched him build dream homes for countless families on HGTV, seeing him step into a real-life family role just added another layer to the good guy image he already carried. But it wasn't just about Jonathan blending into Zoe's family. Zoe also blended into his. The Scott family is famously tight-knit. Jonathan and Drew have built an empire together, and their older brother, JD, is also a big part of their public and private lives. Bringing Zoe into that circle could have been intimidating, but by all accounts, she fit right in. The Scotts welcomed her warmly, and it didn't take long for her to become a fixture at family events. Fans got their first real taste of this dynamic through social media posts. Holiday gatherings, birthday parties, even casual family get-togethers. Zoe wasn't just present, she was part of the fabric, and seeing Jonathan's family embrace her only made the couple's bond look even stronger. One memorable moment that really drove this home was Halloween. Jonathan and Zoe showed up in coordinated costumes, with her kids joining in too. It wasn't a staged Hollywood event, it was just a family celebration that happened to go viral because fans loved it. The photos circulated everywhere, and the message was clear. This wasn't just two celebrities dating, this was two families finding a rhythm together. And let's be real, blending lives isn't always smooth, especially under the microscope of fame. Every move they made was watched, photographed, and written about. But the way Jonathan and Zoe handled it stood out. They didn't overshare, but they didn't act like they had anything to hide either. It was that balance, being open enough for fans to see the happiness, but private enough to protect what mattered, that made their relationship feel steady. By the time they started appearing at more official events together, from red carpets to charity galas, it was obvious that this was more than just a romance. They were building something lasting. Jonathan once said that finding Zoe and being part of her world felt like everything he'd been waiting for, and watching the way he embraced her kids and her family, it was easy to believe him. For fans, seeing Jonathan step so comfortably into this role was heartwarming. He wasn't just the TV personality with a hammer and a smile anymore. He was a partner, a stepdad figure, and part of a bigger family. And Zoe, in turn, found herself surrounded by Jonathan's world, a family empire built on hard work, humor, and loyalty. Together, they weren't just blending homes, they were blending lives. And in doing so, they created a picture that felt both relatable and aspirational, proof that even in the glare of Hollywood lights and HGTV fame, it's possible to build something real. Now, here's where things get interesting. Jonathan Scott and Zoe Deschanel weren't just blending families, they were blending careers. Career crossover. On the surface, their worlds couldn't have been more different. Jonathan was all about construction boots, blueprints, and HGTV marathons. Zoe was on red carpets, Hollywood scripts, and indie music gigs. But once they came together, those worlds started to overlap in ways nobody expected. At first, it was subtle. Zoe would show up to support Jonathan at events tied to Property Brothers, and Jonathan would be spotted cheering her on in her creative projects. But soon, that crossover became part of their story. Fans loved seeing the contrast. The guy next door builder with the quirky Hollywood star. It wasn't just about romance anymore. It was about two industries colliding, and they didn't shy away from it. Magazines picked up on the dynamic almost immediately, putting the couple in photo spreads and lifestyle features. Jonathan, who had spent years being recognized mostly by HGTV audiences, suddenly found himself in the pages of entertainment outlets that normally wouldn't cover home renovation stars. Meanwhile, Zoe's fan base, who mostly followed her for acting and music, got a crash course in the Property Brothers universe. One of the biggest crossovers came when Zoe began appearing more openly in Jonathan's professional projects. She wasn't just there as a plus one, she actively stepped into his world. The most notable example was Celebrity IOU, where stars team up with Jonathan and Drew to renovate homes for people they care about. Zoe not only appeared on the show but worked alongside Jonathan, showing her hands-on side with tools and design ideas. Fans ate it up. Suddenly, it wasn't just Jonathan the builder and Zoe the actress, it was Jonathan and Zoe the team. That team dynamic became a running theme. The more people saw them together, the more natural it seemed. They weren't pushing the power couple label, but it fit anyway. Interviews highlighted their playful banter, red carpets showed their chemistry, and social media posts gave audiences little behind-the-scenes glimpses that blurred the lines between personal and professional. Of course, not everyone was entirely on board. Some critics rolled their eyes at the coverage, suggesting that the media hype was more about their star power than their actual projects. But even those takes didn't slow the momentum. In fact, the crossover appeal only seemed to boost both of their profiles. Jonathan became more recognizable outside of HGTV's audience, while Zoe's public image took on a new dimension as part of a couple fans genuinely rooted for. And there's something worth pointing out here. Jonathan and Zoe weren't afraid to poke fun at themselves. In interviews, they leaned into the novelty of their pairing. Jonathan would joke about being the construction guy dating a movie star, while Zoe teased him about his HGTV fame. That lightheartedness kept things from feeling too polished. Instead of coming across as manufactured, they felt like a couple enjoying the ride together. By 2021, their shared spotlight had become impossible to ignore. They were featured in everything from lifestyle magazines to talk shows, and the coverage wasn't just about romance anymore. It was about how they supported each other's careers and how seamlessly they seemed to move between their two worlds. One weekend they'd be at a Hollywood premiere, the next they'd be filming a renovation reveal, and in both settings they looked completely at ease. For fans, this crossover was part of the appeal. It wasn't just about seeing Jonathan swing a hammer or Zoe play a quirky character. It was about seeing them step into each other's lives and thrive in spaces that once seemed worlds apart. And in the process, they managed to create a shared brand, not forced, but built out of genuine connection. Looking back, it's easy to see how their careers ended up amplifying each other. Jonathan introduced Zoe's fans to the charm of HGTV, and Zoe gave Jonathan a foothold in Hollywood culture he'd never really had before. Together, they weren't just stronger as a couple, they were stronger individually too. By the time Jonathan Scott and Zooey Deschanel had been together for a few years, fans were already asking the big question: when's the engagement coming? After all, the couple seemed solid, families were blended, and their careers were comfortably intertwined. It wasn't a matter of if anymore, but when. Their engagement. That answer finally arrived in August 2023. The news broke that Jonathan and Zoe were officially engaged, and the announcement instantly lit up entertainment headlines. But in true Jonathan and Zoe fashion, it wasn't flashy or staged. They kept it simple, heartfelt, and meaningful. Jonathan popped the question during a family trip to Scotland, which held special significance for him. The Scott brothers have always been proud of their Scottish roots, so it was more than just a romantic backdrop, it was personal. Surrounded by loved ones, Jonathan asked Zoe to marry him, and of course, she said yes. Zoe shared the moment on Instagram with photos that quickly went viral. There she was, smiling ear to ear, showing off a unique engagement ring, a sparkling piece that perfectly matched her vintage-inspired style. The caption was simple but sweet, and fans couldn't get enough. Within hours, the post had racked up hundreds of thousands of likes and comments. People weren't just happy for them, they were invested in this love story from the very beginning, and now they finally had the next chapter. Entertainment outlets ran with it, calling them one of Hollywood's most unexpected but beloved couples. Friends and co-stars chimed in with congratulations, and Jonathan himself shared his joy in interviews, saying it felt like he'd found his perfect match. For someone who had been open about heartbreak in the past, the engagement felt like a full-circle moment. What stood out most was how Jonathan and Zoe framed the milestone. Instead of turning it into a publicity stunt, they treated it like a natural step in their journey. They'd already built a life together. The engagement was just making it official, and in that sense, it resonated deeply with fans. It didn't feel like a Hollywood fairy tale. It felt real. Of course, once the engagement news settled in, speculation shifted to wedding plans. Would they go big with a star-studded event in Los Angeles? Or would they keep it intimate, maybe even tie the knot in Scotland where the proposal happened? Jonathan hinted in interviews that they were leaning towards something personal and family-centered, but as of now, the details remain under wraps. One thing is clear though, whatever they choose, fans will be eager to follow along. Not because they expect extravagance, but because Jonathan and Zoe have built a reputation for doing things their own way. Whether it's Halloween costumes, home renovations, or major life milestones, they've shown time and again that they care more about authenticity than spectacle. The engagement also marked a turning point in how people saw Jonathan. For years, he was the single twin on Property Brothers, the brother whose love life was often speculated about but rarely settled. Now, he wasn't just Jonathan Scott, the TV star, he was Jonathan Scott, partner to Zooey Deschanel, soon-to-be husband and stepdad figure. It reshaped his public image in a way that felt warm and grounded. And let's not forget Zoe. For her fans, seeing her find love again after a very public divorce was uplifting. She's long been celebrated as a beloved Hollywood figure, but this relationship gave her story a fresh chapter, one filled with stability and joy. Together, Jonathan and Zoe became more than just a couple. They became an example of how unexpected love can redefine your life, no matter where you are in your journey. So, as of now, the wedding bells haven't rung just yet, but the engagement itself was enough to prove that Jonathan Scott and Zooey Deschanel aren't just a Hollywood headline. They're the real deal. And for fans who followed them since that first karaoke car ride, the engagement felt less like a surprise and more like the perfect next step. Of course, no high-profile relationship comes without its bumps in the road. For Jonathan Scott and Zooey Deschanel, most of those bumps didn't happen behind closed doors. They played out under the spotlight of constant media attention. Challenges and rumors. From the very beginning, their romance came with whispers. Some people couldn't quite wrap their heads around it. A home renovation star and a Hollywood actress? It sounded like the setup to a rom-com, and skeptics were quick to wonder how long it would last. Entertainment blogs fueled the chatter, running with clicky headlines like "Odd Couple" or "Is this just a publicity stunt?" That kind of noise can wear down any couple, especially when their relationship is still new. Then there was the reality of being a blended family. Zoe was raising 2 young kids from her previous marriage, and Jonathan was stepping into that dynamic with care. To outsiders, it looked seamless. Jonathan often spoke glowingly about how much he enjoyed spending time with the kids, but it wasn't lost on anyone that blending lives takes real work. Critics speculated whether a Hollywood schedule and HGTV filming grind could really allow them to prioritize family life. Add to that the constant paparazzi snapshots and fan curiosity, and it's easy to see how pressure could build. Every move they made, from red carpet appearances to simple Instagram posts, became part of the public record. If Zoe showed up solo at an event, people instantly wondered if there was trouble in paradise. If Jonathan didn't post a photo for a while, tabloids jumped to conclusions. And yes, there were rumors. At various points, gossip outlets tried to stir drama by suggesting that their relationship wasn't built to last. Some cited their different backgrounds, others focused on Jonathan's busy filming schedule, and a few even claimed the relationship was more for publicity than love. But here's what stood out. Jonathan and Zoe didn't play into it. They didn't issue long-winded statements or engage in public feuds. Instead, they carried on, quietly proving the speculation wrong by simply living their lives together. Jonathan has always been upfront about the challenges of fame. In interviews, he's admitted that living in the public eye comes with a unique kind of stress, especially when it comes to relationships. For him, the key was keeping their private life as protected as possible, even while fans and media clamored for details. Zoe, too, seemed to understand this balance. She had already been through years of Hollywood attention, so she knew how to keep the spotlight from dimming what really mattered. The irony is, those very rumors and pressures only seemed to strengthen their bond. Instead of cracking under scrutiny, Jonathan and Zoe leaned on each other. Their social media posts often had a playful, lighthearted edge, as if to say, "We know you're watching, but we're just going to keep having fun." It worked. Over time, even the harshest critics had less to latch onto. Of course, that doesn't mean the pressure disappeared completely. Even now, with their engagement, speculation continues. When's the wedding? Will it be televised? How will they juggle careers and family? That's the trade-off of being a public couple. Curiosity never really ends. But if their track record is anything to go by, Jonathan and Zoe are more than capable of handling it on their own terms. At the end of the day, their story isn't about dodging headlines, it's about rewriting them. What started as an odd couple has turned into one of the most enduring Hollywood love stories in recent memory. And for every rumor that questioned them, they've answered with moments of authenticity that fans connect to more than any tabloid could. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and click on the next video shown on your screen.